G'day. I was working on another project recently and got a bit sidetracked and ended up making up one of those, and I wouldn't have a clue what it's called, but you'll see towards the end of the clip what it does. It basically sits on a rotary table, has a small vise attached to it, and allows you to put a rounded end on a piece of material, a bit like that. So this is the story of making that. It's a bit of reclaimed die steel, so I've got a few holes to patch, and I've got to cut some T-slots and a few other odds and sods, so come along for the ride. So what's it do? Well, as I said previously, it bolts to a rotary table, and a small vise like this one then sits on top, engages with the T-slots to keep it moving that way. It gets bolted down there, and what it enables you to do is have a pretty much a repeatable setup for putting radii on the end of bits of stock. One enhancement could be to get a self-centering vise. I have many vices, but being self-centered is not one of them, and so I haven't done that. One day I might build a self-centering vise for this sort of thing, but in the meantime a little bit of fiddling around to get it set up properly, but then it works a treat. This is the usual start of my thought process. I'll sketch out what I think the thing is going to look like, perhaps. Try a few different combinations of cutter size, maybe a little bit of detail on the vise so that I know what I'm interfacing to. And one of my downfalls, or not, it depends on who you are, is that sometimes that I'll start with an idea and then I'll change it a little bit and then change it a little bit and change it a little bit, and so unless you're me, you probably don't know which order my sketches are in and what the final sort of idea is. Bit of a variation on that 10 ways of designing thing that I've talked about before. However, I got to a point where this is the basic shape that I wanted. And so I then took the sketch dimensions, because notoriously I don't draw to scale, and I produced a cardboard template. This is actually a paddle pop box, but it doesn't really matter. I've used Weet-Bix boxes, I've used chocolate boxes, of all sorts of stuff. And I've drawn things out to scale just so I can see what it's going to look like. And the other reason for this is that I've got some material which I'm going to try and use, but it's got some holes in it, and so trying to work out where to avoid the holes is a good thing. From this, you can see that the dotted line there is the edge of the T-slot, and that's running right into the hold down slot here. And so one of the things that I may have to think about doing is just shortening that slightly. Not a big deal, but it helps to do this before cutting metal or printing plastic or whatever you do with these things. If I had my 3D CAD package back, I could have drawn this up on that and done some similar sort of stuff, but failing that, a bit of cardboard, a bit of paper, scale drawing works just as well. I've just sliced through this bit of 25mm thick steel plate with a slitting saw, 6-inch diameter, because I needed that for the clearance here. Felt a bit nervous about making this cut because I don't use slitting saws much, and I've had them shatter on me before when I've been a bit too aggressive with the feed, but I've worked out that they're like any other saw. You want at least 2 teeth and up to about 10 teeth in the cut, and so I made a couple of passes on this. This is a piece of 25mm plate that I salvaged out of an old die set provided by a friend Ken. It's got a few holes in it from various bits and pieces. Now that one's going to be cut out. That one I've already plugged. That one I think is just going to be a continuation of this. That I'm going to use for locating, and this one here needs a plug as well. I've put the slots in here, drilled, chain drilled, and then opened them up with a milling cutter, and then cleaned up the sides, offsetting slightly, so they're an 11mm slot with a 10mm drill. The one over here is going to get counterbored, relieved, whatever you want to call it, for the head of the tie-down bolt. That's because the vise sits on top. So I've got the start of a hole here. The hole actually comes out here somewhere, so I'll put in an inch diameter cutter and plunge in. And the reason I did the slot first was I figured it'd be easier if the cutter doing the counterbore here wasn't cutting through a whole bunch of material. You know, it was relieved enough that there was a little bit of, at least in the middle, you know, a little less load on the cutter. For those who haven't cut them before, T-slots can be a little bit scary. What you do is you run a cutter, just a straight end mill down the course, giving you your bottom depth, and then you come in with a T-slot cutter. Now, this one isn't deep enough to cut both sides of the slot for the nut, and so I've gone and done the top cut, and then I've done the bottom cut. And the reason for that is that if I show you this, that's full of chips, right? And that's just from cutting. This is cutting on both sides of the cut, so it's generating a lot of chips, and that will, you know, jam if you're not careful. I also use a vacuum cleaner to pull those chips out if I can. As I said, I cut the top slot first, and that way I've got a bit of a trough for the chips to go into. You could do the bottom, it's just you've got to be a little bit more careful about making sure those chips get out. And the critical distance is basically from the underside of there to the top. This can be clearance, which it is, and this bit here can be clearance. It's just got to be the distance between, you know, there and there is the critical one. Round about now, I thought it'd be a good idea if I just tested this thing out, make sure that the principle behind it's sound. So I've put the rotary table up and centered it so that the center of the rotary table is on the axis of the spindle, as I usually do. I then got the little baby vise, put that up. What I've got here is a piece of it's some 20 by 3 steel flat, nothing special, just out of the scrap pile, the reused pile. What I'm going to do is I'll put that in there, clamp that up, get that centered under here with the optical microscope, and then we'll see what happens. That didn't work out too badly. I've got a reasonable radius there. One thing this does seem sensitive to is exactly what angle you have there. So I may have to look at putting some form of key or slide or something to help control the direction of this versus, you know, the angular scale and all that sort of thing. But it works, and it'll do what I want to do. That worked well enough that I thought, oh, I might as well do the rest of the rounding off that I had to do. I solved my depth problems by setting this at 90 degrees and just butting the piece of material up against the cutter. For thin stuff, you need to make sure that you've got the cutter in the right spot, of course, but other than that, that works. What I will do, I think, is put some form of key in the base of the vise here and in here, so that I can slide this along without it twisting and without it going from side to side, because that does seem to make a difference. I'm in two minds about some form of fine adjustment so I can get this dialed right in. It doesn't seem to matter too much, and I can always clean up the you know, any miscutting, I guess, with a file. So that one doesn't worry me too much. The other possibility, of course, would be make up a false tray for this, or maybe a screw or a little mount that'll bear against the sides of this. So that's a possibility, but we'll see how we go. I'm going to refine this a little bit, but that's about it for this. So thanks for watching, and yeah, another idea for your workshop.